Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome back to Dennis Saliba Occult Fortean, and we're back for another live stream. So, in today's stream, I'm going to be talking about Tengrism from the Central Asia Guide. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find the article that I was originally hoping to stream about, which was about religion in Laos. I couldn't find that article. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to search for that again and stream that at another time. But let's show Hungary some love with Tengrism. So Tengrism is an ancient religion practiced in Central Asia over the centuries. From ancient times, a remarkable range of religions and cultures have affected the people of the huge territory comprising of today's Central Asia. Among these influences were at least Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Shamanism, Judaism, Nestorianism, Taoism, Christianity, and eventually Islam. But before any of the religions mentioned, there was Tengrism. The spur of Tengrism was the steppe itself, which a lot of people argue is where the Ugric people came from. They migrated from the steppe and then into the Transcarpath Mountains in the case of Hungary, but the Finns, the Finno-Ugric people, were around here at this time period in history. The vast reach of land and the fathomless bowl of sky, this enormity and emptiness brought into being one of the most significant systems of belief on Earth, a great combination of monotheism and polytheism. I don't know how you could combine those, but we'll see how we go. You can often see sites related to Tengrism during our Kazakhstan tours. Interesting. The concept of Tengrism, the religion named after the supreme deity Tengri, or the sky god, grew out of a primal heathen pantheism into a coherent and lively faith in the unity of all things that continued to live alongside Islam and Christianity up to the 15th century, and may said to be present in the souls of Kazakhstan and Mongolia today. And I'm going to say that Mongolian and Kazakh belief systems also influence Hungary. You see this through the presence of the runes. There are Hungarian runes. We can make another stream about that at a later time. But Hungary also affirms Istan. If you know much about Hungarian folklore and lore, Istan is the Hungarian sky god, and funnily enough, Istan serves very similar purposes to what the Tengri god of Kazakhstan and Mongolia do. So there is a shared common history there, and there are some influences that you can see in even some of the modern history books today. Hey, Sent My Own Way reporting in. How you doing, man? How you doing? It's good to see you in the chat as always. I know I don't quite carry as many people in my streams. Maybe my streams are a bit too esoteric for most. Are you going to be streaming later today? Set My Own Way? Smow? Let me know in the chat. All right, so yeah, even worshipped already long before Islam ever came to Central Asia, long before Christianity came to Central Asia too, I might add. So the word Tengri was obtained from the ancient, again, runes. I told you about the runes. Runic inscriptions found in Kazakhstan and interpreted by a Danish scholar, Wilhelm Thomsen, in 1893. The Turkic origin of this word is no longer in doubt. The idea of Tengri in all its beauty appeared at the time of the Turks, which back then, there were two waves of Turks, two main waves of Turks. You had the Khazarian Khaganate of the 12th to the 13th centuries, but before that you had another group of Turks later, and the Pechenegs, in the case of Hungary, were booted out of Khazaria. They went into the Transcarpath Mountains, migrated there, and then they married into the 13 tribes of what was later known as Aprad's Magyars, which are the Pechenegs. Doing great. Been loving these streams early in the morning. What time is it there? Because it's like 8:19 p.m. here. I will almost certainly be streaming today. All right, I will hurry up my streams. I did have more than one planned, but I will hurry up my streams. I will jet off over to yours after this stream, and then I might stream afterwards. I have a few articles that I can talk about. We'll see how we go. The idea of Tengri and all this beauty appeared at the time of the Turks as the most ancient sign and eventually took form as a pagan country dollars, or that's what pagans are. See, most people think of pagans as Wiccas, which is absolutely a psyop driven by the CIA and the Gloria Steinem types of the 70s. The word pagan actually is Latin for the pagus, which are the people of the country. Quite similar to the Latinized version of bumpkin today, but pagus, Latin for people of the country. Originally, it was used by the Romans to disparage the Germans, but not just the Germans, what they would call the barbarians. Not just of Carthage, but like the Germania as a whole, because there were more than one German tribe back then. And that word pagan just literally means person of the country. It's not to do with pure witchcraft in the Wiccan sense of the word. So it's one of the biggest psyops of our times. Religion at the time of the Huns' early state of the 3rd century BC, the cult of substance being heavens, Kuk, Tengri, and again the Khazarian Turks and the Pechenegs do share common roots in the belief systems and the cultural influences of ancient Hungary. According to investigator of Tengrism, Kutlay Erdogan, interesting, Erdogan, I, as well as the cult of substance being on earth, Gia Tengri, again, pardon my pronunciation, I don't speak Turk, was a characteristic of the Turkic tribes inhabiting all regions of Central Asia. Tengrism emerged among the nomadic tribes of Central Asia and Siberia in antiquity. Now, funnily enough, in Hungary's case, the ancient Hungarians appear to be closely related more towards the Siberians than they do the Turks. The Turks do not enter the picture until much later, around the 12th to the 13th century. But there's also a Mongolian influence because twice, and again, I've been reading up on Hungarian history, twice the Mongolians invaded Hungary back in, I think it was 1248 was one of the conquests. There was a conquest before that. So basically, in the first conquest, the Mongolians did manage to breach through the Trans-Carpath Mountains. They killed off something like 25% of the Hungarian population of back then. The second time, during their invasion of Hungary, the Hungarians held them off in the Trans-Carpath Mountains, and they learnt how to implement volleys of longbows in the Trans-Carpath Mountains, and they also learnt how to deal with the heavy cavalry of the Mongolians of back then. So it was a really interesting time for Hungary back then. Hungary's identity was mixing more towards this point. I shared this live stream on my community post. Maybe some other people can't subscribe it if they see it. Maybe I'm shadow banned. I don't know. But on this show, we just keep it real. We keep it real. We keep it objective as we can. We don't try to judge certain religions here. We don't try to judge any of the religions here. But if you're talking about sacrificing babies and stuff, not so good. That's not what we look at here. Tengrism emerged, we talked about this, of Genghis Khan's 13th century Mongol Empire. Okay, so Khazarians to the west, Mongolians from the south were coming into Hungary at this time. The Huns and early Bulgars, which are the Proto-Bulgarians, by the way, carried Tengri worship into Europe because, again, they were migrating from what was believed to be Siberia. But no historian knows the actual true origins of the Finno-Ugric people. That's a mystery to history to this day. But what they do know is the migration patterns happen to occur around modern-day Siberia, more towards into the Transcarpath Mountains and westwards towards the what you could consider to be the northern parts and beyond of Poland, basically. However, Tengrism gradually waned as major world religions spread along trade routes by the 8th to the 9th centuries. Uyghurs, Turks, had adopted Manichaeism or Buddhism by the 10th to the 14th centuries. Most of Central Asia's Turkic peoples converted to Islam or Tibetan Buddhism in the case of the Mongolians, which is interesting because there might be, I suspect, there might be Tibetan Buddhist tantric influence in Hungary, actually, of all places. I'll get to that in a moment. Islam's arrival was not an overnight replacement. Islam blended with Tengrist traditions in a syncretic mix. Many shamanistic and animistic practices were absorbed into local Islamic folk customs, allowing aspects of Tengrism to survive under an Islamic veneer, maybe arguably still to this day. For example, Central Asian Muslims still honor spirits of ancestors. That's true. I have some students who practice Islam. That's actually true. I've seen that firsthand. Visit sacred springs. I've also heard about that firsthand from them. And tie offerings to trees rooted in the Tengris past, now interpreted in an Islamic context over centuries. Pure Tengrism as a formal religion largely faded, but its cultural imprint remains strong. One influence being the Hungarian runes. Those are Turkic Hungarian runes. Those are not Nordic runes, actually. I can tell by that's not featured in the Elder Fuldak. To my knowledge, that's not featured in the Elder Fuldak. Neither is that. Those are very similar. That looks like the War Elder Fuldak rune. That too. But that and that definitely don't seem to appear in the Elder Fuldak runes. So interesting nonetheless. For these nomads roaming the steppe, moving their herds from one pasture to the next, the heavens, the mountains, the hills, the rivers. Trees and the detail and creatures were all holy manifestations of a single whole worthy of adoration, emerging from contacts with Indian, Tibetan, and Chinese cultures. Because back then, the Hungarians were also influenced by another group of people. These are the red-headed Chinese that are not as known about. What I believe is transcribed as the Shongshu people, the Western Chinese looked, they had Chinese facial features, but they had red hair like the Celts. It's a very interesting group of people, the Shongshu, but they were present towards the West. Truth isn't really popular these days. No, it's not. No, it's not. With its characteristic hierarchy of spirits often represented on the ground by animals, these spirits were Loki, or maybe Losai or Loki, of either evil or good to avoid the disfavor of the forces of evil. Men were to win the favor of the forces of good. Genghis Khan and his followers are also known to be strong followers of the Tengri. The fall of Tengrism started when the Mongol state expanded again. I talked about this. Expanded partially towards Hungary in its first conquest and the Transcarpath Mountains in the second, all the way to the river Danube. And the rulers of different areas were converted to different religions. Various sacrificial rituals were performed by shamans at elaborate ceremonies seeking salvation from the spirits of sickness and poverty. Interesting. An admission in the afterlife to one of 17 levels of Tengri's heavens. These shamans or khams clearly describe their journey to the heavens during the rituals. After sprinkling, this is a bit like Korea, and Japanese belief systems look a little bit like this too. In practice, similar coats. Now this looks more Siberian influence to me, Siberian and Turkic, but nonetheless, Japanese and Korean Buddhism does have some of these motifs in their belief systems, actually. After sprinkling the sacred hearth with kumis, fermented horse's milk, the shaman would fall to the ground in ecstatic shaking and would start narrating, often rhythmically, to collective chanting. Something allegorical to be interpreted by gathering and seized upon as a revelation. I'm going to say as a revelation as opposed to as revelation. Multiple revelations could be received over a shaman's lifetime. The rituals customarily were executed at the summits of hills or in the mountains or on riverbanks or amid sacred beech or juniper groves. The mountains played a very special part in the formulation of Tengrism. Juniper branches are often burned during rituals, and in the similar manner as it is common for Zoroastrianism, the spilling of fermented horse milk or kumis, is also a live tradition still practiced to this day. Drawing upon numerous sources, the 20th century Turkish scholar Abdülhalih Bin has highlighted the role of the stone cans uba, such as still survive in the Altai Mountains and the southern Urals. They were built by the ancients as votive structures for the spirits of the mountains. The highest peak of Tian Shan inevitably took the same name of the deity, Mount Tengri. So there's a Chinese connection there. Heaven, mountain, Tian is heaven in Chinese. Shan is the Chinese word for mountain. And Tian Shan is the place of the Tengri, the heaven mountain or Mount Tengri. So that's a pretty interesting crossover to note. Rising against a background of the endless spaces of the steppe, the soaring and virtually unsaleable mountains naturally presented themselves as a physical bridge between earth and heavens. Interestingly to note, under Nepalese and Indian Buddhism, same could be said for Mount Kailash in Nepal. Mount Kailash is seen as the bridge between the house of Shiva, Lord Shiva, and the earth. The bridge between the two, actually. There's another connection there that's more implicit than explicit. Words whose root implied height soon became synonymous with the divine or the mountain. This led to the ultimate narrowing of the idea of height to the concept of one god Tengri, proclamation, in effect, monotheism. Okay, now I see what they're saying about monotheism. Monotheism is consensus as opposed to monotheism as outright cosmological model. It evolved into a monotheism as a consensus. In the 6th century, Tengrism suffered an assault by Christianity. In the 7th, it survived the endeavor of Judaism to penetrate the territories of Tengrist adherents by the birth of Islam in the 7th century and its militant sweep across Asia. In the ensuing generations, Tengrism was subtly enhanced and refined with the attributes of a millennia-old religion, temples, priests, prophets, and verbal tradition and written canons. I wonder if some of the Turkish hadiths were also influenced by Tengrism too, if the caliph would be acting in a similar role to the shaman, and then they would get a revelation possibly from Allah or one of the angels like Jibril, and then they would verbalize the revelation, then the written canon would write that also down. That makes me think if there was also an influence there. Yet for several centuries, it was to prove an effective competitor with other more codified dogmatic religions. Only in the 15th century was it overwhelmed by Islam. I think most places were overwhelmed by Islam in the 15th century back then. This was around the time before the more modern Turkish Empire came about. Not the Khazarians. After the Khazarians came about, the Sultan, the rise of the Sultan. I think that was Mehmet the Second. Was often associated, he's associated with this time period. It is still nevertheless evident in prayer in certain mosques and among certain communities by the transposition of Allah, there you go, as the name of God with Tengri. So basically Allah substitutes Tengri in some more modern versions of this belief system. And in the prevailing attitude among Kazakhs of reverence for singleness of creation. Tengrism is centered on the worship of Tengri gods and the sky god Tengri, heaven or the god of heaven, also shared within China and Tibetan Buddhism, interestingly enough. This is similar to Taoism, and Tengri is often linked to the Chinese Tian, Guk or Guk. I think that's how you pronounce it. Guk. Tengri, blue sky, is the sky deity and often considered the highest god, while Gu Tengri remains abstract, never depicted in anthropomorphic or zoomorphic forms. Other deities are often personified. The total number of deities believed to exist in varieties from population to population. Deities may be related to natural aspects of the world, such as earth, water, fire, sun, the moon, stars, air, clouds, windstorms, thunder, and lightning. Interestingly enough, Hungarians do have a being that they believe to be connected with thunder and lightning, and I'm wondering if this is more from the Norse influences of the time and also the Slavs with their Perun influencing this part of Hungarian cosmology, because Hungarian cosmology does affirm a thunder lightning being, and they also have runes kind of similar to the Norse, but also taken from the Turks as well, a bit of both. And it's like a mishmash of both of those systems below the veil of what is Aprad's beginning to introduce Christianity, later codified by King Stephen I. Animals were thought to be totemistic symbols for specific gods, like the sheep being associated with fire, cows with water, horses with wind, camels with earth. In Hungary's case, again, I talk a lot about Hungary because this is ultimately a Hungary-focused stream. Turul, I've made a video about Turul already, but Turul is the Hungarian protector bird of the sky, protector of the mother of Hungary. Many folk customs in Central Asia are virtually Tengrist or Zoroastrian practices in disguise. So again, a bit of an influence from Persia. I'm going to say Persia because Iran is more of a modern British creation. Persian, Zoroastrian influences in disguise, but maybe not necessarily only Persian, other groups as well. One of the most visible is the habit of tying ribbons or strips of cloth on trees at pilgrimage sites. The Koreans and the Japanese do that too, actually, interestingly enough. Usually the tomb of a local saint or a shrine in nature. Central Asians in rural areas visiting a shrine might tie a piece of fabric to a branch while making a wish or prayer, a direct continuation of the Tengrist offering to the spirit of a tree or the genius Loki or Losai of that place. This is common in places with sacred springs or at certain ancient ceremonies. Another folk habit, especially in the countryside, is to burn ispand or harmala seeds to carry the smoking embers around the house to expel evil spirits. You're going to have to remember that one. Exactly as Tengris shamans used to do with juniper or artemisia smoke. Artemisia, similar name to the female naval commander of ancient Greece. Artemisia is probably named after her too. Another Tengris holdover is the folk medicine and healing tradition, even today in Central Asia, beyond modern doctors and Islamic imams. People may seek help from shamans or spiritual healers, in addition to sacred hot springs. These healers might use a drum, recite incantations in Old Turkic, or use sacred objects like wolf fangs or owl feathers to diagnose and expel spiritual afflictions. They often appear to tear spirits. I wonder also if that's connected to Norse influence, the Tyr god as well. And again, I'm posing more of a question rather than drawing an outright conclusion. This is not an outright conclusion. I'm just saying that the word appears to be similar to Tyr, the Norse god who puts Fenrir on a leash, if I remember the myth correctly, or call on the Koti, blue sky in their prayers. The Mongolians also believe in the Koti too, funnily enough. While officially such practices are considered superstition in rural areas, they remain respected. I'm surprised that they exist to this day, given the nature of the surrounding religions that dominated at the time. In Kyrgyzstan, it is common for a family to visit the graves of relatives and burn juniper at the site, calling out the names of ancestors to enlist their guidance and protection. Kyrgyz epic traditions like the reciting of the Epic of Manas are infused with Tengrist cosmology. The Bard, and I wonder if also this is connected to the Bardo. The Bard invokes sacred mountains, the hero Manas, prays to Guk Tengri, blue sky god, at crucial moments. In various episodes, reference visionary dreams and spirit journeys are typical of shamanism. All right. Other religions in Central Asia. I'm going to skip parts of this because I want to focus more away from the Abrahamic side of things and more towards the non-Abrahamic side of things. The Pamiri people follow the teachings of Shiite Aga Khan, which is a very practical and less strict branch of Islam. In the past, Central Asia was dominated by Zoroastrianism, known as fire worshipping. It spread to Central Asia from Persia. Buddhism was introduced to Central Asia over 2,200 years ago. It thrived along the Silk Road and influenced the religion's art, culture, and philosophy. There are also several sites in Central Asia where we can see the remains of Buddhist temples. Funnily enough, reaching down as far as Afghanistan before Daesh or Islamic State blew it up. And other sites of worship, Buddhism flourished in parts of Central Asia until the 11th century, particularly under the patronage of the Uyghur Turks. However, the rise of Islam beginning of the 7th century started to weaken the Buddhism in the religion, and the region was fully dominated by Islam by the 16th century. There are several Sufi sites in Central Asia that the locals do not wish to refer to Sufi sites, but plainly as Islamic sites. I could see why. They most likely want to preserve it and not say that these are Sufi sites to keep the Sufis not fighting the Shiite and the Shiite not fighting the Sufis. From a heritage preservation perspective, that would make sense. So Sufism represents the inner mystical dimension of Islam. It emphasizes spiritual experiences and a direct communion with God. Balbals. Balbals, mostly found in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, are perhaps the most visible heritage that has been preserved for us. To us from the times of Tengrism, in addition to the custom of tying the wish ribbons to trees, and the many petroglyph sites, the Kazakh steppe and many sites in Kyrgyzstan also have countless kurgans, or burial mounds, where archaeologists have found horses ritually buried with their riders. Now, in those days, if you were an owner of a horse, you were seen as someone of having like a higher form of honor, and your higher form of honor had to be buried with you because you were basically the guardian of the spirit of the horse, and the guardian of the spirit of the horse was equally a carrier of the flame as much as that they were equally a carrier of the sky. They were a force of both, depending on the region that you're talking about. But the main commonly accepted interpretation of those beliefs today is that the horse was the carrier of the spirit of the fire and the sky. The riders were the warriors who could bear the flame and bear the sky. Clear evidence of the Tengris belief in needing one's steed in the afterlife and the practice to honor the sky gods, because they were the carriers. They carried the warrior to battle, but they also carried the flame, and they carried the beyond. So that's a very interesting article, one that I've wanted to cover for a while on this show. Please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Did you learn something new? Was there something that you could comment on if you are a Turkish viewer, or maybe someone from Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or one of the other stans, or Mongolians? If you're a Mongolian viewer, just let me know. And yeah, the human spirit prevails. The human spirit does prevail. Humanis Invictus. All right, bye for everyone. Bye now for everyone. Take care. All the best. I will see you in future live streams.